Let's dive into the intriguing world of traditional Japanese sexual culture that's now considered taboo. Picture yourself strolling through the vibrant streets of old Japan, where customs and traditions were as colorful as the cherry blossoms in spring. But beneath the surface, there's a tapestry of practices and beliefs that have evolved over time, some fading into the shadows of taboo.
Ask me to bring myself closer to you.
From mixed bathing to Nanshoku, arranged marriages to Shunga Art, each aspect offers a glimpse into a bygone era where boundaries were more fluid and desires were celebrated openly. Join me as we explore 13 traditional facets of Japanese sexual culture that now reside in the hushed whispers of history. Number 13, Shunga Art. Shunga art is quite fascinating. It's a genre of Japanese erotic art that flourished during the Edo period 1603 to 1868. The term shunga literally translates to spring pictures, which is a euphemism for eroticism. These artworks often depict explicit sexual scenes, but they're also imbued with humor, playfulness, and a celebration of human sexuality. Imagine wandering through the bustling streets of old Edo-era Japan, where vibrant prints depicting all sorts of naughty scenes catch your eye. Shunga art was like the risque comic books of its time, bold, explicit, and often downright cheeky. It wasn't just about titillating the senses. It was a celebration of human desire and sexuality in all its forms. Shunga reflects the openness towards sexuality in traditional Japanese culture, and offers insights into societal attitudes towards love, intimacy, and desire during that time. Most shunga was created by artists from the popular school, ukiyo-e, pictures of the floating world, a genre of painting mainly illustrating life's pleasures. Picture this: couples entwined in passionate embraces, playful flirtations, and even some eyebrow-raising positions that would make modern romance novels blush. But here's the kicker: shunga wasn't just for the elite or aristocrats. It was enjoyed by people from all walks of life, from samurai to merchants to everyday folks. Surprisingly, traditional painters also produced a large quantity of shunga, including members of the Kano school, known for their innovative secular paintings. Shunga was primarily commissioned by males of the ruling class. Shunga art faced restrictions and eventual decline due to changing societal norms, legal reforms, and cultural shifts. The Tokugawa shogunate issued orders in the 7th and 18th centuries to curb the production and distribution of shunga, with bans on pornographic literature and strict regulations on new publications. Despite these efforts, shunga continued to be created and circulated, albeit underground, indicating a persistent demand for this erotic art form. The Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century brought further denouncement of shunga, leading to its taboo status within Japan, while finding appreciation in Europe among artists like Toulouse-Lautrec and Picasso. The decline of shunga was also influenced by the introduction of Western culture, technological advancements in reproduction methods, and the rise of erotic photography, which offered new mediums for sexual expression and impacted the traditional art form's popularity. The transition from a society that embraced shunga as a form of uninhibited expression to one where it became stigmatized reflects the evolving attitudes towards sexuality and art in Japan, contributing to the cessation of shunga's prominent presence in Japanese culture. Number 12, prayer dance. So picture this. In Japan, you've got this vibrant dance called kagura, right? It's like a beautiful symphony of movement and color, all meant to pay homage to the gods and celebrate the wonders of nature. But here's the twist. Back in the day, some of these dances had a bit of a saucy side to them. Think of it as a way to spice up the prayers, with some symbolic nods to fertility and prosperity thrown in. It's like saying, "Hey nature, let's make sure there's plenty of good stuff to go around." The kagura dance in Japan is a sacred ritual dedicated to Shinto gods, originating as a ceremony to pray for a good harvest and ward off disasters. It symbolizes entertaining the gods and has evolved into a popular form of entertainment while retaining its religious roots. Kagura performances often depict gods defeating demons based on ancient myths, emphasizing the belief in divine intervention against natural calamities. Back in the day, these dances weren't just about asking the gods for a good harvest or a bit of luck. They had a little extra flair, especially when it came to fertility. Picture dancers gracefully weaving through motions that symbolize the cycle of life and the natural world. It's like a dance of connection between humanity and the divine, with a touch of that ancient magic that whispers, "Let's keep the blessings flowing." Today, while the dance itself isn't all about getting frisky, it's a reminder of Japan's colorful past where traditions, spirituality, and yes, even a hint of sexuality all came together in a fascinating mix. Number 11. Night crawling-Yobai. Curious about a rather interesting aspect of Japanese sexual culture. Yobai, which means night crawling. This term refers to a particular kind of sexual activity where one partner surprises the other with intimate advances while they're asleep or in a state of semi-consciousness. It is a tradition for a man to visit a woman's home to make love, though a woman also does so at a man's home. A woman may be a single, a wife, or a widow. A man who wishes to make love with the woman would visit her at night. She may or may not accept his wish. She has the full power to say yes or no. This tradition was once common throughout Japan and persisted in some rural areas until the Meiji era and even into the 20th century. The act was discreet, with the man leaving by morning, and although the girl's family might be aware, they often pretended not to know. Yobai was a way for young people to find potential spouses, showcasing a unique approach to courtship and relationships in Japanese history. The practice varied regionally, with some areas allowing visits to any post-puberty woman, while others restricted it to married women and widows, excluding single girls. Yobai was practiced among commoners as well as by aristocrats. There is one interesting example of yobai in the oldest Japanese poetry collection, called Manyoshu, compiled in 759 AD. One particular poem written by a woman from a simple village describes how an emperor visited her at night for yobai. She lived in a mountain village. She was from a simple village family. Her poetry expresses her sorrow for her secret relationship with the emperor. The emperor came for her to make love, but her parents were sleeping. Since she was from a simple village home, the family had only a room or two. Her parents were sleeping nearby. Her parents would likely wake up if she walked over to them to take the emperor in. While wondering what to do, the dawn had arrived. The emperor was left outside the house, unable to see her. This ancient practice of yobai continued up to the end of World War II, with some rural areas still practicing some more years after the end of the war. Number 10. Mixed gender bathing in Japan. Mixed gender bathing, known as konyoku, was once a common practice in traditional Japanese culture, particularly in communal hot springs called onsen. People of all ages and genders would gather to relax, socialize, and enjoy the therapeutic benefits of the hot springs. Imagine stepping into a scene straight out of a historical drama. A serene, hot spring nestled in the Japanese countryside, where people of all ages and walks of life gather to soak away their worries. That's the vibe of mixed-gender bathing, or konyoku, in Japan back in the day. From the earliest known times, the Japanese have been honoring the water, be it river, ocean, stream, or hot spring, as a cleansing agent, just as the god Izanagi cleansed himself in the stream. Japanese also made love while they ritually bathed in the water. Sex had been viewed, therefore, as a sacred ceremony with full creative power. This view is rather difficult for contemporary Japanese men and women to comprehend. In many ways, contemporary Japanese have forgotten about this legacy of important sacred sexuality traditions. The tradition of mixed baths also implies that people felt very comfortable about their bodies and nakedness. They had no shame nor taboo about being naked. Picture this. Families, friends, and even strangers sharing the same relaxing waters, chatting away without a care in the world. It was a cultural norm, a way to unwind and connect with others in a natural setting. A mixed bath among men and women was a norm rather than a rarity, until American Admiral Perry forced Japan to open her ports 150 years ago. But fast forward to modern times, and things have changed. With shifting attitudes towards nudity, privacy, and personal space, mixed-gender bathing has become a bit of a taboo in Japan. Most hot springs and bathing facilities now offer separate areas for men and women, ensuring everyone feels comfortable and respected. It is relic of a bygone era when social norms were a little different. The decline of mixed-gender bathing can be attributed to various factors, including cultural changes, legal restrictions, and a growing emphasis on personal boundaries and comfort. So, while mixed-gender bathing might be a taboo now, it's also a reminder of Japan's rich cultural history and how things can change over time. Who knows, maybe one day it'll make a comeback, but until then, we'll stick to our separate baths and enjoy a little privacy along the way. Number 9. The Utaki Ceremony. The Utaki Ceremony, a blend of spirituality and sensuality that was once a vibrant part of Japan's cultural tapestry. Picture this: a gathering of people coming together to honor their ancestors and pray for fertility and abundance. The Utaki ceremony was an ancient Japanese Shinto ritual gathering where villagers would meet on mountaintops to celebrate the beginning of spring or autumn with singing, dancing, eating, and free sexual intercourse, all in honor of fertility and the cycle of crop and harvest. Poetry and songs were exchanged between participants in a contest meant to seduce suitors. Mount Tsukuba in Ibaraki Prefecture was an especially popular place of meeting, attracting people from all the Kanto region. Some Shinto shrines served as places for sexual encounters, which became Oita Prefecture. In other regions like Ibaraki and Aichi, the feasts included a parade or ritual dance kagura, after which it was given license to maintain sexual relationships. It was hosted biannually on the seasonal transitions. Localized variations abounded, though most of them featured the offering of ritual sexual activity to the local gods, allowed on this occasion by the temporal abolishment of social norms about marriage and decorum. Though celebrated by peasants, Utagaki was a prestigious ritual, to the point there are records of both Emperor Shomu and his daughter Empress Shotoku visiting gatherings to offer gifts. But here's the twist. Woven into the fabric of the Utagaki ceremony were elements of sexuality and fertility rites. Symbolic gestures and rituals hinted at the mysteries of creation and the cycle of life. However, as Japan evolved over time, so did its attitudes towards sexuality and tradition. The Utagaki ceremony, once a cherished part of the cultural landscape, gradually faded into obscurity. With changing social norms and a shift towards modernity, practices that once celebrated sensuality came to be viewed as taboo or inappropriate. Today, the Utagaki ceremony is a relic of the past, remembered more for its historical significance than its sensual undertones. While it may no longer be a part of mainstream Japanese culture, it serves as a reminder of the complexities of human tradition and the ever-changing nature of societal norms. Number 8. The practice of Nanshoku relationship in Buddhist monasteries. Let's delve into the intriguing but now forbidden practice of Nanshoku relationships in Buddhist monasteries in Japan. Centuries ago, within the walls of Buddhist monasteries, there existed a unique form of companionship known as Nanshoku. It was a relationship between an older monk, known as the ninja, and a younger apprentice, called the chigo, or wakashu. The relationship was dissolved once the boy reached adulthood or left the monastery, emphasizing honor and fidelity. While Nanshoku was culturally accepted and even celebrated in various contexts, including samurai society and Shinto beliefs, it is now considered taboo. Buddhist monasteries openly engaged in these relationships, reflecting a cultural acceptance that has evolved over time. Beyond just mentorship, these relationships often had romantic and sexual undertones. The Japanese term Nanshoku, which can also be read as Danshoku, is the Japanese reading of the same characters in Chinese, which literally means male colors. The character has the added meaning of lust in both China and Japan. The term shudo, abbreviated from wakashudo, the way of adolescent boys, is also used, especially in older works. Nanshoku was not merely about physical desire. It was believed to foster spiritual and emotional growth between the mentor and the apprentice. However, with the modernization of Japan and the influence of Western values, attitudes towards sexuality shifted dramatically. Today, Nanshoku relationships are considered taboo and forbidden in Buddhist monasteries. The focus has shifted towards celibacy and the strict adherence to monastic rules, with any form of romantic or sexual involvement frowned upon. While Nanshoku relationships are no longer practiced openly, they remain a fascinating aspect of Japan's cultural history, offering insights into the complexities of human relationships and the evolution of societal norms over time. Number 7. Yoshiwara. Diving deeper into the allure and downfall of Yoshiwara. Picture this. Yoshiwara was like a city within a city, a labyrinth of narrow streets lined with ornate brothels where courtesans known as oiran captivated clients with their beauty, wit, and charm. It was a world where fantasies came to life and desires were indulged without judgment. But beneath the glamour lurked darker realities. Many of the women who worked in Yoshiwara were sold into the profession or forced into it by circumstances beyond their control. Despite the opulence of the district, life for these women could be harsh and exploitative. Yoshiwara was home to some 1,750 women in the 18th century, with records of some 3,000 women from all over Japan at one time. Many were typically indentured to their brothel. If indentured by their parents, a larger advance payment would often be received. Though contracts of indenture often did not last more than 5 to 10 years, the debt sometimes accrued by these women could keep them working there for much longer. However, a significant number either served out their contracts and married a client, went into other employment including other forms of prostitution, or returned to their family homes. In these cases, the advanced payments a woman's parents received could be used to fund her dowry. Despite this, many women also died of sexually transmitted diseases or following failed abortions before completing their contracts. If chosen to receive the correct training at a young age, a girl indentured to a brothel could become an apprentice to a high-ranking courtesan. When the girl was old enough and had completed her training, she would become a courtesan herself and work her way up the ranks. Another path to success and eventual freedom for a working woman in Yoshiwara was for a rich man to buy out her contract from the brothel and thus keep her as his wife or mistress. A further path would be for a woman to work successfully enough that she could eventually buy her own freedom, though this was an uncommon and infrequent occurrence. However, as Japan modernized and Western values began to influence societal norms, attitudes towards Yoshiwara shifted. What was once celebrated as a playground of pleasure became stigmatized and condemned as immoral. The government cracked down on prostitution, leading to the closure of Yoshiwara and the outlawing of its once thriving sex industry. Today, Yoshiwara is a shadow of its former self, remembered more for its scandalous past than its present reality. While remnants of its history linger in museums and historical sites, the district itself has been transformed into a quiet neighborhood, its once flourishing sexual culture now relegated to the annals of taboo and memory. Number 6. Concubinage. Into the intrigue of Japan's past, let us explore the once accepted practice of concubinage, a tradition that eventually fell out of favor and into the realm of taboo. Concubinage is a state of cohabitation that lacks the sanction of marriage. The origin for a male to hold a concubine was for sexual pleasure and to ensure numerous children. Back in the day, having concubines was also seen as a symbol of status and power among the Japanese elite. Samurai, nobles, and even some wealthy merchants took on concubines as secondary wives or companions. These women lived in the household alongside the official wife and children, often occupying a lower social status but still playing significant roles in the family dynamic. Concubinage in Meiji Japan was socially acceptable, but the Meiji Civil Code legally adopts monogamy. Men during this period turned to concubines for entertainment, emotional fulfillment, and sexual pleasure. The custom of this time that did not allow respectable men and women to associate with one another in a friendly manner turned men to concubines. A woman having a lover was grounds for divorce, along with it being a criminal offense. Women in those societies had little rights. They had the lowest places in the family and community. It was quite common for a poor father to sell his daughter to a rich man to be a concubine, to get money to take care of the rest of the family. There were also women who were forced into being concubines simply because a rich man or ruler liked the way they looked. Concubinage wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was also about politics, alliances, and ensuring the continuation of the family line. A concubine might bear children who could inherit wealth and influence, strengthening the family's position in society. However, as Japan underwent rapid modernization and embraced Western values, attitudes towards marriage and relationships began to change. The practice of concubinage came under scrutiny, viewed as outdated and morally questionable. Also, the shift in societal norms reflects changing attitudes towards relationships and gender equality. Today, concubinage is considered taboo in modern Japanese society. Monogamous relationships are the norm, and the idea of taking multiple spouses is largely frowned upon. While concubinage may still exist in some cultural or religious contexts, it's no longer openly practiced or accepted in mainstream Japanese culture. Now, it's time for our subscriber pick of the video. In traditional Japanese society, various cultural practices and customs shaped attitudes towards sexuality. Looking at the picture, teenage girls have unfortunately been vulnerable to exploitation and harm. Practices like Enjo Cosi compensated dating have often targeted young girls who may be financially disadvantaged or seeking validation. Historical customers could also involve the exploitation of young girls, placing them in situations where they may face coercion or abuse. However, over time, societal norms have evolved, and many of these traditional aspects of Japanese sexual culture are now considered taboo. Have you ever considered whether traditional sexual culture might unintentionally perpetuate female exploitation? Kindly drop your answer in the comments section. Number 5. Mizuage. Back in the day, the mizuage ceremony was a significant event in the lives of young women from prestigious backgrounds. It marked their transition from girlhood to womanhood and was often associated with the auctioning of their virginity. Picture this: a young woman, adorned in elegant attire, undergoing a ritualized ceremony to signify her entrance into adulthood. The highest bidder would win the privilege of being her first sexual partner, with the transaction often accompanied by gifts, money, or social status. Mizuage was a ceremony undergone by apprentice Oiran Kamuro, which means a senior prostitute, and some Maiko apprentice geisha, as part of their coming-of-age ceremony and graduation. For Kamuro, who had often already lost their virginity, a patron would pay for the exclusive privilege of being a new Oiran's first customer. For Maiko, who underwent mizuage, it formed part of a number of ceremonies and occasions used to mark graduation into geisha-hood, including symbolic changes in hairstyle and official visits to benefactors. Before the outlawing of prostitution in Japan, Maiko, who underwent mizuage, would see patrons and benefactors bid large sums of money for the privilege of taking their virginity. A sum of money, the okiya, the geisha house an apprentice was affiliated to, would take entirely. In other words, this practice, now considered taboo, was a financial arrangement where a girl's virginity was sold to someone who enjoyed sex with virgins or the charms of a specific individual. Despite its historical context, mizuage is now viewed as sexual exploitation, as described by former geisha Sayo Masuda. The practice was outlawed in Japan following the anti-prostitution law in 1956, categorizing it as traffic in human flesh. Today, the geisha community and society at large regard mizuage as a contentious issue, with many geisha having undergone this experience involuntarily before the law's enactment. Number 4. Omurashi. The term omurashi refers to a fetish subculture in Japan that revolves around clothed incontinence. Imagine this: people finding a thrill in controlling their bodily functions, whether in private or sometimes even in public settings. It was seen as a form of arousal, with some finding excitement in the sensation of relief after enduring the urge to urinate. This fetish involves scenarios where individuals experience a strong urge to urinate and either wet themselves or have accidents in clothing. Omurashi media focuses on garment fetishism, featuring individuals in school uniforms, professional attire, or other dignified outfits before succumbing to the need to urinate. While omurashi is a fetish element in erotic films, It does not necessarily involve direct sexual contact, often serving as a form of foreplay. Fetishists who are into this kink may have specific scenarios they enjoy, such as while waiting in line for a bathroom, or just doing it for fun in front of the toilet. Regardless of their personal wedding preferences, everyone who is into this kink enjoys watching someone wet themselves or have an accident in clothing. Omurashi is one of those things that used to be more accepted, or at least not as taboo in Japan, but nowadays it's definitely seen as more on the fringe. It's like it's gone from being kinda out there but tolerated to being more hush-hush, or even frowned upon. Number 3. Wakashudo, the way of the youth. Wakashudo, often translated as the way of youth, was a historical cultural practice in Japan that involved mentorship and intimate relationships between older samurai men and younger apprentices. While it had its place in Japanese history, it's now considered taboo due to its association with relationships involving significant power imbalances and potential exploitation of young apprentices. The practice of wakashudo in pre-modern Japan was a deeply ingrained aspect of samurai culture. Young men, or wakashu, were often taken as apprentices or protégés by older and more experienced samurai warriors, who would guide them not only in martial arts, but also in etiquette, poetry, and other cultural pursuits. These relationships were often romantic and sexual in nature, and were seen as a natural and acceptable part of samurai culture. Same-sex love was celebrated in art, literature, and theater, and was often depicted as a beautiful and noble thing. One famous example of this is the tale of the 47 Ronin, a story that has been retold in many different forms throughout Japanese culture. In the story, one of the Ronin, masterless samurai, is in love with his lord and is willing to sacrifice everything for him. This love is seen as a deeply noble and honorable thing and is celebrated throughout the story. While wakashudo was often seen as a way to mentor and guide younger men, it was also a way to form deep emotional bonds that could last a lifetime. Many samurai warriors had lifelong partners who they loved and cherished deeply, and these relationships were often celebrated and respected by their peers. Overall, the practice of wakashudo in pre-modern Japan was a deeply ingrained and celebrated part of samurai culture. Same-sex love was not stigmatized or discriminated against, and was instead seen as a beautiful and noble thing that could form the basis of deep emotional and romantic bonds. Number 2. Enjo Cosi compensated dating. Enjo Cosi, also known as compensated dating, used to be a troubling trend in Japan, where older individuals paid money or gave gifts to younger companions, often teenagers, in exchange for their time or even sexual favors. It was like this weird mix of companionship and financial transaction, and it's definitely seen as taboo now. It is a type of transactional relationship similar to the Western sugar dating. The female participants range from schoolgirls to housewives. Enjo Cosi emerged in Japan in the mid-1990s as a trend where older, wealthy men sponsored attractive individuals in exchange for companionship. This practice, involving young girls receiving money or gifts for performing favors for older men, is not considered prostitution in the traditional sense, but has raised concerns about exploitation and the objectification of young girls. Enjo Cosi has been associated with issues of teenage prostitution and the commercialization of relationships, highlighting societal challenges and the impact of modernization on cultural norms in Japan. While Enjo Cosi was a prevalent phenomenon in the past, it is now viewed as taboo in Japanese society, reflecting a shift towards more stringent regulations and a growing awareness of the ethical implications of such practices. The evolution of attitudes towards Enjo Cosi underscores changing perspectives on relationships, sexuality, and the protection of vulnerable individuals in contemporary Japan. In recent years, there's been a big push to tackle the issue because it raised serious concerns about exploitation and the well-being of young people involved. It's just not okay to have these kinds of relationships where one person, especially if they're older, is essentially buying the attention or affection of someone younger. Society's working to address the root causes and provide better support for vulnerable individuals to prevent this kind of thing from happening. Number 1. Nozoki Voyerism. Nozoki, or Nozoki Ana, refers to the act of peeping or voyeurism, which involves secretly observing others, often for sexual gratification. It occupies a tapestry of Japanese sexual culture. This reflects the complex relationship with sexuality, where the act of watching was inspired with erotic significance. Historically, the practice of peeping or observing others without their consent for sexual gratification was not only prevalent, but also interwoven with various Japanese aspects of art. In traditional Japanese culture, Nozoki was often romanticized. It's definitely considered taboo in Japan, as it violates privacy and personal boundaries. Peeping is a serious issue that can cause harm and discomfort to those being observed. Japanese society generally condemns such behavior, and there are laws in place to address it. While there may be depictions of voyeurism in certain forms of media or entertainment, it's important to recognize that these representations don't reflect societal acceptance of the behavior. Instead, they often serve as cautionary tales or sources of conflict in storytelling. Overall, respecting others' privacy and consent is key, and peeping is definitely not okay. Nozoki is not accepted as a cultural norm and is instead recognized as a form of misconduct that infringes on individuals' rights to privacy and dignity. The evolution of societal values and the emphasis on respect for personal boundaries have led to the stigmatization of voyeuristic practices like Nozoki in Japan. While there may have been instances of voyeuristic behavior in history, it wasn't something that was openly acknowledged or condoned. Instead, there was likely a sense of shame or secrecy surrounding such actions. Today, society's attitudes toward privacy and consent have evolved, with a greater emphasis on respecting personal boundaries and ensuring that all interactions are consensual. As a result, voyeurism remains taboo in modern Japan, just as it has been throughout its history. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.